Welcome to the Daily Agenda. A number of people have asked me to make a documentary about Jonathan Bowden, what Ed Dutton called the shaman of the radical right. Well, where did that come from, the radical right? Well, it came from the centre-right, didn't it? Because that's what Professor Dutton is. He's centre-right, he's a Tory boy, like Rupert Lowe and Charlie Downs. We covered this last night, remember? And how they feel displaced from the official Tories because they're just too liberal left and they're just only a whisker to the right of them, remember? And that is the informed thinking, so to speak, of Ed Dutton's character assassination on Jonathan Bowden, for want of a better description. And I'll tell you exactly why I believe it's character assassination. In response to the people who've asked me to make a documentary about Jonathan Bowden, I've told all of them exactly the same thing. I didn't know Mr. Bowden. Therefore, I'm not in a position to comment on him with authority, and certainly not on his mental health or psychological state, for that matter. Given the fact that the man is dead and died young, it would be quite odd for me suddenly to become an expert on a dead man, would it not? Which sort of begs the question why Ed Dutton thinks he's an expert on a dead man that he never met, never knew, never spoke to, and he's watched a few speeches and read some text, and no one would cooperate with him. No one of any significance, that is. So how does that make Ed Dutton an expert of any description? Well, it doesn't, does it? You see, in truth, there's another issue with Dutton and Bowden. Now, Bowden, the Tory, defected, really, didn't he? And joined the British National Party and became a hugely influential public speaker across the country with his flamboyant style, his enigmatic, almost madman style, as Ed Dutton puts it. And I think the way in which he portrays Bowden as being a borderline genius but mentally unstable, an incurable liar, and pretty much totally off his rocker, is entirely in keeping with all the smear campaigns that have been run against me by the centre-right. In truth, where it comes to smear campaigns, I've been subjected to 100 times more smears from the centre-right than I ever have the far left. That should tell you something. That should tell you something about what faction of people is the real enemy of British nationalism, and whilst the left ostensibly are the enemy ideologically, in truth the real enemy, the bitter enemy, is the centre-right. I mean, how many times have we caught them plotting and scheming and orchestrating violence against us? I'm not aware from any intelligence source at this moment in time of any far left plot to organise violence against British nationalists, past and present. However, I am aware of several plots by the centre-right to orchestrate said violence. Okay? I think nationalists need to completely recalibrate their perception and understanding of the centre-right and how to deal with them. Otherwise, you're all going to come up very abruptly with an almighty shock. The Zoomers, of course, most of them, it's too late for them. They don't know whether they're centre-right, nationalist, or quite frankly something else. I don't know what else they might be, because they don't actually know what they are. But what I do know about this subject is, frankly, Edward Dutton is not a man I actually like, and I openly admit it. I asked Kenny Smith what he thought of Ed Dutton after being interviewed by him, and he said, he's growing on me. And I laughed because I was thinking, what, like a bacillus? An unpleasant bacillus, like a fungus, you know, like the type of mould that infects your toenails. That type of fungus, that's what I thought of him. And the reason why is because he is just so transparently, manifestly a Tory. Now I can hear his defenders and protectors saying, how could you say such a thing? How do you know such a thing? You've never met Edward Dutton. You've never spoken to him. You've never spoken to anyone who knows him. Absolutely right, and you've just fallen straight into your own trap, haven't you, clowns? Because that, when transposed in the mirror, is exactly what Ed Dutton did to Jonathan Bowden. Is it not? Okay? So I'm here to reflect back at them, their own misgivings and their own failings. And I stick to my opinion that Edward Dutton didn't know John Bowden at all. I didn't know John Bowden. And as such, I'm not going to make a documentary about him because I'm not an authority on the man. But what I do know is the centre-right never writes anything flattering or complimentary about any nationalist. We're always the radical right. I mean, we had that clown Nick Tenconi, who leads about 30 other clowns in UKIP last night on X, saying that he finds ethno-nationalists absolutely revolting people and they're disgusting. Now, you must remember Tenconi is another Tory, he's another clown, and he runs at the first sight of trouble. That's a well-documented fact, like nearly all the centre-right clowns, because in the common parlance, nearly all of them are pussies, and Tenconi most definitely is one. In fact, he's so typical of the blowhards that come from Eastbourne. They strut around with their chest bulging out, thinking they're hard men, until it actually comes to the crunch. I was actually going to say something else. It's a little bit too crude for you two. And I'll save that description for another time, probably on Rumble. And we can do some real rumbling with the truth, can't we? But that's the issue with all of these centre-right people. We roundly and openly condemned all forms of ethno-nationalism. Why? Are they the far left? You don't even see the far left making these statements anymore. In truth, no. And the reason why is because the centre-right has replaced the far left. They're even worse than the far left. The difference is that whilst they do a great deal of talking, shit talking primarily, remember it is mostly shit talking, they do very little in terms of delivery. And as I spoke to a friend of Charlie Downs today on X, he was concerned about the video I put up last night in relation to his interview with Andrew Gold. And he said, well, I got to watch it first. And then he watched it and came back to me and said that he shared my opinion and that he was deeply disappointed in his friend Charlie Downs for condemning the so-called far right and for playing the left's game, and more importantly for going on to wax lyrical in that interview about paramilitaries forming and leaders emerging to take them into battle. I can absolutely assure you that Charlie Downs won't be one of them. Maybe Ant Middleton will be the saviour of the centre-right. Yes, I very much doubt that one as well, quite frankly. But anyway, getting back to, well, is it really a departure? Because we're not actually moving anywhere, are we? We're dealing with nationalism and the centre-right. So I'm not really getting back to Edward Dutton. I'm simply commenting on Dutton again. People have asked me many times, what do I think of Edward Dutton's book about Jonathan Bowden? Well, I've read a few parts of it, and I've seen all of his podcasts about Bowden, and quite frankly, I've given my opinion earlier in this podcast. Dutton is not an authority on Jonathan Bowden. He didn't know the man, never met him. No one of any significance would cooperate with him on the writing of this book, and therefore I can only conclude that what Dutton has actually written about Bowden is just yet another centre-right smear campaign, because it's just so similar to all the left-wing and centre-right smear campaigns that have been mounted against me, and they're still trying it to this day. And none of them have met me, none of them know me, none of them have ever spoken to anyone who knows me or knows anything about me in truth. They just live in this little swamp of fairy tales, from which they pluck one fairy tale after the other, and scatter them like confetti into the public domain. And then when it comes to the crunch, legally, they get the floor wiped with them because they're clueless and stupid, and they don't seem to understand that evidence matters when making allegations of the nature they've made against me. If I was to repeat all the allegations they've made against me, all of which are completely false, we'd probably be here for about another 30 minutes. It's quite a chronology of abuse, quite frankly. But yes, Dutton. What was his real purpose on on John Bowden? Just straightforward character assassination. And I would guess the real reason is not just the enmity between the centre-right and nationalists. And any nationalists out there who think, oh, there's no enmity between us, you're living in a dream world. You need to get out of that dream world or just join the centre-right where you belong. There is deep enmity between nationalists and the centre-right. And in truth, Bowden had the temerity to leave the grubby Tories behind, didn't he? And hook up with Mr. John Tyndall and Nick Griffin. And Griffin despised Bowden as well. Well, he would do, wouldn't he? You know, anybody with talent, Griffin despised. He despised me, despised everyone with talent. That's why he drove everyone with talent out of the party and destroyed the BNP. And in truth, Dutton, his character assassination attack on Bowden, in my opinion, is quite transparent. And if you think it's not, I'd urge you to go away and watch the podcasts Dutton has done on Bowden. And as I said, I didn't meet John Bowden. I never knew him. I've never spoken to him. I've never spoken to anyone who actually knew him. And therefore I'm not an authority on the man. But I can tell you what I definitely am an authority on. Centre-right smear campaigns and smashing them to pieces. And Dutton has done nothing more than smeared Bowden. And he needs to be pulled up on that. And I'm pulling him up on it.